the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast. And if that sounds like something that you want to listen to regularly, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple, Spotify, and rate, review, and most importantly, subscribe. Because if you do subscribe, you won't miss our episodes when we drop them on Mondays. And speaking of Mondays, it is not one right now like it usually is. It is Tuesday. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But usually on Mondays at 4 p.m., we go live on the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube page. And you can tune in live there and comment, come hang out, and very literally be a part of the show. So go do that and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell, the like button, and share the show if you feel so inclined. Tell your friends about it. We want as many people watching as we can get. But at Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports. This is A to Z Sports.com, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports. That's all the stuff. I'll start off by saying this. We're recording on Tuesday because on Monday there was just one of the most heinous things I've ever seen occur in Nashville. The shooting of those school children and some of their teachers too. Unbelievable. And Zach and I just talked about it, and it just didn't. The whole day was just off. Just such a sad, terrible day for Nashville. Obviously, it's a Nashville-based company that we're working for. I mean, a whole set of the dudes that work for this company live within, a few miles of where that occurred. So horrific. So we just called off the show yesterday, and thoughts and prayers to everybody involved in that. I mean, it's so genuinely unimaginable. Everything with that, not going to go into it, but that is why we're doing the show on Tuesday, and just every good thought and every prayer possible out to everybody around that shooting. My gosh. But with that said, this show is supposed to, it's frivolous nonsense. This is sports. And so we're just going to try to make an escape here from the sometimes extremely dark real world, Zach. But what's up, man?
Yeah, it feels kind of weird being here on a Tuesday, but yeah, certainly you said it well there. Just a horrific day yesterday on Monday, and just can't imagine what those families are going through, and really not really anything you can say except you just have them in your thoughts and prayers, and just again can't even imagine what they're going through. But Tennessee was still back on the practice field today. The show must go on in the world of sports. It's like it never really stops for anything. So they were back out there today.
We're going to talk about it all. Let's start here because we haven't had this show actually. Well, let's start here first before I get into anything. This is honestly, probably the most important thing we can do as far as this show is concerned in itself. We've got to talk about these sponsors because they keep the show going. Superbook Sports. There's no better place to wager on your favorite sports than Superbook Sports. Go to superbook.com and download the app today. Superbook Sports. Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey from Longstall Distillery. Make your own luck just like Tennessee football's fast-paced Rattle and Snap offense with Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey. And Omaha Steaks. Get $30 off your order of perfectly aged steaks with promo code VOLS. That is VOLS. Omaha Steaks. And finally, Farm Bureau Health Plans for better coverage, better rates, and better service. Go to fphb.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Got to get that out of the way also. But let's talk about this first. The Final Four is set. We had a show at the end of last week about Tennessee losing the Sweet 16. We talked about kind of how at this point Rick Barnes is pretty much cemented as the Mark Richt of college basketball, and you can go watch that video if you'd like to. I think we had a pretty good breakdown of that entire situation. We're going to talk a little bit more about the future of Tennessee basketball today also. But probably the funnest part of that weekend that we haven't gotten to talk about on the show is that Alabama's not in the tournament anymore. And praise be, oh my word, cannot tell you the relief that I felt seeing them get bounced, getting their just desserts, getting what they truly deserved, which was a completely unceremonious, embarrassing loss to end the season. Oh, that was satisfying, and I got to mention that up top because we haven't got to talk about it yet.
And Brandon Miller was terrible
So
throughout
bad.
the entire NCAA tournament. I mean, he set a record for the lowest field goal percentage by a player since like ever, I guess, in the tournament. And it was on a minimum of, I think, 35 field goal attempts is kind of the cutoff there. And he shot 19.5%, just dreadful. I don't know if it was, he's a good player. Like everything aside, obviously, one of the best players in the country. Kind of thought, okay, this is going to end up being the Brandon Miller show in the tournament. Alabama goes to the Final Four. It's just the way I kind of saw it playing out, just because that's how things go, right? Especially if you're a Tennessee fan. But yeah, he was pretty bad. I don't know if the pressure of the tournament got to him with some of the attention that was placed on him. Who knows what some of the fans were probably saying towards him in some of those arenas. But he definitely did not help Alabama out any. And as we saw all season, as Brandon Miller goes, is how Alabama basketball goes, and that's what happened in the tournament.
That was, yeah, not just a loss for Alabama, but seeing Brandon Miller as bad as he was. I mean, just one. Some of the statistics were like historical. Like he was just truly atrocious, really incredible. I mean, Olivier Kama, I want to say overall, he ended up having a better performance in 3 games in the tournament than even Brandon Miller did.
And Kama didn't really even do much.
He didn't show up in the third game.
Yeah.
So,
but the Duke game, I mean, you do have to, you don't get to the Sweet 16 without his performance in the Duke game, though.
No, yeah, I mean, he was incredible. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about some stuff that's been written about the basketball team this week. You wrote about it on A to Z Sports, Zach. I don't think you were the originator of the idea, but some people have thrown out, oh, Tennessee should replace Rick Barnes with Dusty May. With Dusty May of Florida Atlantic, of course, making Final Four. We're going to give our thoughts on that. See if that would actually be something that Tennessee might want to do, or if that's just ridiculous nonsense that we should disregard. But first, we're going to have to talk about spring practice. We are a full week down for Tennessee football. Spring practice. It's been fun so far. We've all been trying to keep up with it, trying to find out who's been standing out, who's been making their name in spring practice, which we always say, you know, take with the grain of salt, because there's been a lot of guys that make their name at spring practice, but and then turn out to transfer and have nothing ends up really happening. But we're going to talk about all of that in just a second, right after I tell you about our amazing sponsor, Omaha Steaks. And I didn't get the graphic up. Here it is right here. Look at that promo code Vols for Omaha Steaks. Spring is in the air, and that can only mean one thing: spring grilling. The steak experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to spring into something delicious with their semi-annual sale. It starts Wednesday, February 22nd. So make sure you mark your calendar for 50% off site-wide. Need to update that. Grab all your favorites like perfectly aged tender steaks, ocean fresh seafood, juicy burgers, air-chilled chicken, and decadent desserts. Plus, when you go to omahasteaks.com, use promo code VOLS at checkout, you'll get an additional $30 off your order. That is VOLS at checkout. It's the perfect way to get fired up and spring into something special. Don't wait. Go to omahasteaks.com. Use code VOLS at checkout. Take advantage of this deal. Omaha Steaks is ready to ship your order right away, and you're not going to want to miss this 50% off site-wide sale, because it's only for a limited time. So don't miss your chance to save. Visit omahasteaks.com. Use code VOLS at checkout and get an additional $30 off when you shop. Minimum order may be required. That's Omaha Steaks promo code VOLS. Go get you some steaks. They are super tasty. Had them sent right to my door. It's good stuff. And thanks to them for helping out the show and keeping us going. Now back to spring ball. Zach, I'll throw it to you first. I think you've watched more of the press conferences maybe and some things like that than I have. You're an around the clock, just watching everything like a hawk kind of guy for A to Z with everything that you write. Some of your initial impressions of this first week of spring practice.
Well, I think the biggest story for me is the depth that everybody's talked about. It seems like, everyone from Josh Heupel to the assistants is a lot happier with where the depth is, which you would expect in year 3. I mean, that this should be the case. It's not like it's a surprise. I mean, this is where you want the team to be, but just hearing how excited they seem to be about the depth, and that's going to be super important, especially for the defense. I've really got the feeling listening to Tim Banks talk and Rodney Gardner, defensive line coach, talk that they really want to place an emphasis on being able to get pressure with their front four, their defensive line without having to bring blitzes all the time to generate that pressure, which would obviously take a lot of, pressure off the back end of your secondary, which is what struggled last season. And, that's to be expected if you're having to blitz a lot to create pressure. And to do that, though, they really have to rotate a lot of guys, especially the way that Tennessee's offense plays. Defense ends up on the field playing more snaps than maybe in a typical defense where they're playing alongside a traditional offense. So having that depth along the defensive line is really going to be huge, and is oddly going to help the secondary be better by having all that depth up front. So that to me is super encouraging to hear. And I really think the offensive line, I mean, we talked about before spring practice started about that being a concern because you lose Darnell Wright, a first round pick, maybe a top 20 pick. I mean, he keeps shooting up the draft boards. I saw a mock today with him at, 14 to the Patriots. And then also Jerome Carvin, who is incredibly underrated, was a great leader and just another great, offensive lineman there that was playing guard. Replacing both of those guys is tough, but you've got some continuity with the guys along the line. Everybody else was coming back. You brought in a couple of transfers. Seems like John Campbell from Miami is kind of locked into that left tackle spot, which to me, that's a great sign. If you already know this early in spring practice that that's probably going to be your left tackle, that means he's probably catching on pretty quick. I mean, very quick if you think about it, especially since he wasn't here, obviously for those bowl practices before the Orange Bowl. He's picked up really quick, impressed really quick, and they've taken Gerald Mincey and Crawford, kind of flipping them from what they did last year at left tackle over to right tackle. Maybe that's a situation where they make a big jump going to the right side like Darnell Wright did, from 2021 to 2022. Not saying that's what's going to happen, but perhaps that will be the case. You got to hope. And then, Andre Karich, the transfer from Texas, slotting in at one of those guard positions that Carvin vacated. He's a guy that's got a ton of versatility, so he's got a lot of knowledge. He's played everywhere at Texas. I think he played tackle there. He played some tight end there. I mean, stuff like that, just knowing everybody else's responsibilities is only going to help an offensive lineman do their job better. So I think there's a lot of reason for excitement there. And I mean, that's where you win games in the SEC is the trenches. So hearing positive things from both of those areas to me is, the offense is going to be good as long as Joe, what Joe Milton needs to do, right? That he has to be accurate. That he can't throw, bullets through receivers at 10 yards out. As long as he doesn't do those things, we know the offense is probably going to be pretty good again. Maybe as good as last year, maybe better, but it should be in that same range. It's all about the defense, obviously, in the back end holding up, and that all, goes back to the trenches and the offensive and defensive lines.
I don't want to over expect anything specifically with that offensive line because, I mean, the loss of Darnell Wright was so huge, but I also, I don't want to say I'm like overly nervous because I really don't think this is going to happen, but I'm certainly in the back of my mind, you kind of go like, what if this offensive line breaks down without Darnell Wright? Like it's super obvious this coming season that he's gone. And so getting that figured out is it might be with the defensive line, it might be like 1A, 1B, or I mean throw in terms of 1B defensive backs, linebackers of the defense, you can a ton of that is pretty wide open and positions of need. But with the offensive line, just because the offense was so good and it seemed like Wright was just so perfect in what he was called on to do there. He just really filled that role incredibly well and was so good at it. He was a smart kid and really hardworking. And so that is certainly the thing that probably makes me the most nervous going into the season with a new quarterback and a new right tackle. But I mean, we've heard, nothing looks bad there. You don't have glaring deficiencies where you're like, oh, we're trying to start a kid who's a walk-on at this position. There's none of that.
And there was a lot of that in the past, right?
Yes,
I mean, there's been a ton of that under Butch, under Pruitt. It seemed like these guys. It felt like under Butch and Pruitt, it was constantly shuffling the offensive line, which is terrible for continuity. Obviously, you want your offensive line kind of set. I mean, it helps everything just flow so much better. But it seemed like it was constantly, okay, we're going to try this guy at guard. We're going to try him at tackle. We're going to move him here, maybe even put him at center. And it was always this revolving door. And they weren't able to just practice in one place a lot of times. And Pruitt, with his philosophy of he wanted every player to know pretty much like every offensive line position. He wanted DBs to know every DB position, which I do get to some extent because his philosophy was, if this guy playing cornerback is also my best safety and this safety goes down, then we can move him here and put another cornerback in there. Like I kind of get what he was at, but it made it difficult to kind of master a position. And it seems like under Heupel, especially with the offensive line, they're really shooting for that continuity. And in this offense, obviously that's really, really important because of how fast you move. You don't want a guy going from guard to tackle and then all of a sudden he doesn't remember what his responsibility is and you're not getting to the line and getting set, and then the whole thing breaks down and it's 3 and out, and we know how that can go. It can just spiral from there. So I think it's part philosophy and just part really being really smart on Heupel's end.
Absolutely. Well, some of the other dudes of names that I've seen just in the reports from Rocket Top Insider, 247 Sports, everywhere, from all the dudes that are there every day. Some of the names that have been brought up, that this was one, fans were like, uh-oh, this is bad for Joe Milton. Arian Carter, freshman linebacker, picked off Joe Milton reportedly in a practice. And is that amazing for Arian Carter or bad for Joe Milton? I'm going to go much more amazing for Arian Carter. That's a great way to show out. And Joe Milton, I mean, color me skeptical of thinking that he'll throw a ton of his interceptions this coming season after he's thrown exactly 0 in his time at Tennessee so far. So I think that's cool. You heard that, and that he's kind of stood out and looks like the real deal. And then other ones, Cam Selden on the offense, Ethan Davis at
Ethan
tight
Davis
end.
has really been hyped up a lot.
Yeah, that's seen some of those dudes say that he's a real deal. That's all exciting. It does seem like there hasn't been anybody that's willing to commit to dudes that are DBs being like, oh, he looks really great. That might just, I say that as an interpretation of what they've been saying. I haven't seen anybody go, this dude in the defensive back room has been really just stood out. At least I personally haven't seen that. Maybe that has been said. I'm not sure. And I feel like that it might not be bad, but you never know when things are omitted like that, where you go like, is there still not dudes on that set of defensive backs? Because, your Gabe Judy Lollies and some of those other guys that you want to step up and help you out there. You want to see that. I hope that they fill that in. I just haven't seen it so far in the analysis from those practices, but there are definitely guys that are standing out so far.
Yeah, and then the secondary, I think part of that also is just some of Tim Banks' philosophy. I think he is a little more, let's just see how this goes and build depth and make people kind of earn those roles. I think Judy Lolly's pretty much been running with the second team so far. I don't think they're going to bring in a transfer on that side of the ball and just put him at the top of the depth chart. And maybe that's just me rationalizing it. Maybe, you hope that it's like the offensive side where somebody like John Campbell comes in and just takes the job. But I don't know if that's really how Tim Banks wants to operate, especially since you're going to rotate a little bit more probably at those positions with some of the different defenses you're running out there.
Absolutely. So from that, was there anything else with spring practice? We got to move to, you're a little time crunch today. Not too bad, but anything else before we move on to recruiting? Because obviously, spring ball, I mean, they just put on pads on Saturday. Not too much to take away yet. We got to hear from Nico Iamaleava. It was good. He seems really mature and like he's moving along excellently, but not a ton to take away from his actual play on the practice field. You're throwing against there. Only so much you can see there. But was there anything else with practices before we move on to this recruiting piece, Zach?
I'm really interested to see how the running back situation turns out for Tennessee this year because I think you're going to see Jalen Wright emerge as the number one running back and kind of take that from Jabari Small, whereas Wright was the more productive running back a year ago, but Jabari Small received more carries than him, not a ton more, maybe like 10 or 15 more, but Wright outproduced him, and it was pretty obvious that Wright was the better option. He's more elusive. He proved last season that he can be a physical runner and run through tackles and break some of those tackles and turn them into big gains. Seems like there's been a lot of talk about him being a leader, really stepping up, kind of running the drills, just being the alpha male in that group. It'd be interesting to see if he does take that step and end up going to the top of the depth chart, and then how the rest of it shakes out. Because you got Dylan Sampson, we all hit explosive last season. You Jabari Small, who is still a very productive player, scored like 13 rushing touchdowns a year ago. You've also got Cam Seldon that you mentioned earlier that's been working at running back, and I know that Tennessee plans to use him in some creative ways, but that's a lot of depth at running back. And you got some other freshmen that came in as well that probably won't crack that rotation, but that position's in really good shape. I just wonder how the playing time shakes out. How do they rotate? Is it Jalen Wright getting a drive, Dylan Sampson getting a drive? Jalen Wright's going to be the guy for most of a half. I mean, I'm really interested to see how that shakes out.
For sure. And it'll just be kind of a matter of time. Get the first scrimmage coming up on Saturday. I'm not sure if the media will be privy to them. No media. So
I think Josh Heupel speaks right after, and that's when the media is allowed in at like 12:30 on Saturday.
It's going to be one of those situations where all of those guys
go. According to my out there,
according to my sources, Joe Milton looked good or looked bad.
Somebody hiding up in the upper deck watching with binoculars.
It's a GA. That's who's telling you. We a little insight behind the curtain there. Some of those guys have connections so good that it's like assistant coaches and things that actually tell them that. But before we move on to this recruiting piece, I just want to say to everybody watching, let's see, we got Billy, Danny, Devin, of course, Big Ten Jeff, as always.
Oh, Charlie's BFF.
Yeah. Caleb says, thank you guys so much for this type of content. Exactly what I want to absorb. Absolutely. We are happy to do it. And thanks for watching. Always DDC is here too. Top troop. Everybody, we appreciate you hanging out and commenting and weighing in on everything. And but it's to your point. Billy also says Dylan Sampson has potential for sure. Completely agree there.
He got better in pass protection. I think he still needs to get a little better in those situations. I mean, he had some lapses last season, but he's worked really hard at it and improved. But yeah, he definitely, he has the biggest home run potential, I think, of any of those guys. But Jalen Wright's pretty fast too.
Yeah. But it's I think it's gonna be Jalen Wright's time. Obviously, we'll have to see, but it just feels that way to me. Oh, and Jeff says I'm still waiting on my time on the show. Yeah, I did lose a bet to Jeff. A little bit of a long story there, but I am supposed to bring him on for 5 minutes. It wasn't deep enough into the off season yet, Jeff. I'll talk to you on Twitter.
Charlie wants to bury it in like the middle of May.
Yeah, exactly. We're just not far enough in to have his nonsense on the show yet.
He does ask who's replacing the wide receivers. We could discuss that real quick if you want.
Who is replacing? Oh, you just like Jalen Hyatt and those. Well, and I also saw a comment up here that I wanted to mention too. Devin said, "Have y'all mentioned how awful Jalen Hyatt was during his Pro Bowl pressers?" I don't know.
I watched him, and look, I like Jalen Hyatt a lot.
I didn't see it.
I think he just tried to come across a little too confident and a little too serious. He seemed a little uptight, where it was almost like chip on his shoulder type deal, like he feels disrespected because of the talk about his route running and this and that, which I think, look, they're fair questions because he did run a limited route tree at Tennessee. I think we all know that. But also, he deserves the chance to prove that he can, be a good route runner. But his answers did come across a little bit kind of overconfident and just kind of uptight, maybe is the right word. I got that vibe a little bit.
Yeah. I didn't see it, so I'll leave that to you. But Jeff says, who's replacing the wide receivers? I mean, Billy kind of answers him right there. Brew McCoy is going to be dude. Thornton is
Dante Thornton.
Yeah, Dante Thornton. White. And then it as you already sort of mentioned there, it's usually only a 3-man rotation if the offense is chugging along correctly. They don't do a lot of substitutions there. They run a really tight rotation. The real question is like obviously or a Mel Keaton. He's the biggest question, but then also do they work in Chaz Nimrod and some dudes like that? I saw some video of Chaz Nimrod today. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I would put it this way: they got the dudes. Don't worry about it.
And
They'll be fine.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think Jalen Hyatt's comments came at the combine. His pro day is actually on Thursday of this week, is when Tennessee holds their pro day.
Yep, it's on the 30th. And we're obviously that'll be talked about next week. We're going to discuss what might happen there. If anything remarkable happens at the pro day, we're definitely going to talk about it on the show, but it's coming up on Thursday of this week. So hopefully some guys show out there because, I mean, seriously, some money has been made at some of the pro days I've been to. Remember Cam Sutton had a really great pro day that I covered.
He got paid this offseason too.
Yeah, he did. And you can make some money there with all the scouts that end up coming. So hopefully that goes well for those dudes. We'll talk about it next week. But we're going to have a quick discussion of recruiting. It was a big recruiting weekend for Tennessee football. When is it? Not one unless it's a dead period. But we're going to talk about that in just a second, right after I tell you about our friends, Farm Bureau Health Plans. Farm Bureau Health Plans have been helping Tennesseans for over 75 years. Much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ. Or walk into one of their 200-plus locations across the state. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Thanks to them for supporting the show. So on the recruiting front, it was a big recruiting weekend. Had a bunch of people in. Actually, a couple of guys that you want to stay committed. That was a really important part of this weekend, and we'll discuss that. And then a whole set of new guys that you want to get committed. The biggest note out of that we can start off with here was the number one quarterback in the state of Georgia, Jake Merklinger. It's got to be Merklinger, right?
It's got to be.
Yeah, Merklinger. Sounds a little weird, but Jake Merklinger is 4-star kid, number one quarterback out of the state of Georgia. I looked at his info on 3, and Tennessee at the moment leader in the clubhouse, according to On3's. They have that prediction machine thing. It was a 36% chance he chooses Tennessee. Some of the other ones listed were Michigan State, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina. Some of the stuff I read said North Carolina is probably the main contender there. But the main thing that happened that I think is notable here is that 247 Sports put in a crystal ball for him to come to Tennessee. And I always say on this show, those dudes that put those crystal balls in, and this one was Steve Wiltfong at 247. I mean, he's the lead guy over there for recruiting at 247. Those dudes do not put those in unless they have a real good idea of where a guy might be going, unless it's just super, super early in their recruitment. And this one, it's kind of in between. You're not super early, but you're also not, near the end either. But here, those guys don't want to be wrong. The recruiting directors don't want to be wrong. So they put that in with a lot of consideration. And so he gets a crystal ball to Tennessee. This is really interesting because you got to think he's looking and going, all right, well, I'm going to be behind Nico for a minute. And so that's pretty interesting that one of the top QBs is that interested in Tennessee, even with that situation.
Yeah, it really is. I was kind of surprised by that. I don't know how hard Georgia's really going after him. And Georgia's quarterback philosophy, recruiting at least, is kind of odd under Kirby. I think they're going more towards just find a guy in the portal and plug him in, which can obviously work really, really well. I mean, look at all the success that guys have had over the years, like Baker Mayfield and Justin Fields and Joe Burrow, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's not a bad strategy at all. I mean, but it seems like it's between Tennessee, maybe UNC are the two main players there. I mean, we'll find out on Thursday when he commits where he's going, but it is kind of shocking that you've got Nico, obviously, like you said, and you've also got Nico's younger brother in the 2025 class that Tennessee's going after. And there's a couple of other guys in that 2025 class that Tennessee has high on their list as well. So, I mean, you go get these guys. If they stay, they stay. If they don't, they don't. It's just the world of college football now. Big Ten Jeff also mentioned before it went away, I wanted to reference it. He said, "What's with the?" Let me put the comment up here. What's with the weird dude who is committed for baseball but just
Yeah,
released the top 12 for football? So I guess she's talking about Amari Jefferson. I assume is who he's talking about. That's
I think so.
committed to Tennessee ball. His football recruitment has blown up. So if you're going to get a scholarship and play both, you have to go football. We'll see. I mean, he's not going to stay with that commitment to Tennessee baseball, obviously, but playing football at Tennessee and baseball is an option for him as well as other schools. So we'll just have to see where that recruitment goes.
Could he be a who was the guy at wasn't it Notre Dame? It was Jeff Smarja. Am I
Oh
making that up?
yeah, that was him. Pitch for the Cubs.
Yeah, and he was. I think he was a wide
He was a
receiver.
tight end or wide receiver, tight end, something. Yeah,
Yeah. he could. Maury Jefferson could be
I miss the
Jeff
two-way
Smarja for
guys. I remember growing up. Charlie Ward at Florida State played basketball, football, and baseball there. And I guess he went pro in basketball and played for the Knicks for a while. I think I miss seeing a lot of those two-way guys like that.
Yeah, it just is so. I mean, you say even so rare. I don't know that you almost ever see it happen. Period.
I think there was one at LSU a couple of years ago, an outfielder that played on the football team.
And at Florida State, Winston.
Jameis, yeah.
Jameis Winston he played baseball also.
When Josh Dobbs committed, the original plan for him was to play baseball at Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just always football ends up getting top billing. I mean, it's the moneymaker. It's the, ultimately a lot of those guys, they want to go and play football instead of anything else.
And Kyler Murray, we're forgetting about him.
Did he play?
Well, he didn't play in college, no, but he was, he was playing minor league and then playing football at Oklahoma.
Yeah, he was drafted. But regardless, that could be cool. I would love to see a dual sport athlete like that. It just is so rare. It just very, very seldom actually
and
happens.
It's because Ben Hall mentions kids don't grow up playing multiple sports anymore like they used to. They're specializing at 8. I have an 11-year-old, and I've made sure that does not happen with him. Plays a lot, big into baseball, plays basketball, wants to try something else, go play football, whatever. Play multiple sports, find what you like, enjoy the experience. Most of these kids aren't getting scholarship pro anyway, so enjoy what you like and have a good time with it.
Yeah, that was always my take. I'm not gonna play pro, so
if my kid has seen my athletic career, he should probably give up some of those hopes.
That's the spirit.
Yeah.
But otherwise, in this recruiting weekend, you had Jonathan Eccles, Caleb Beasley, who are committed to Tennessee. They came back into town, and you're just trying to keep them around. They're big class builders. They're guys that you really need to keep in. Caleb Beasley, obviously a guy for in-state who you really want to keep. And then Eccles, I mean, he's just a 5-star kid. Obviously, you're going to want to keep him around. And so hopefully they made some serious leeway there because specifically with Eccles, I mean, you're facing down Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. I mean, who doesn't want a kid like that on their team? And so you got to keep them locked down. And if you can, it gets you started down that road of another top 10 class, and hopefully they can do that. But I would put it this way. It'd be great to hang on to them, but losing them is where would be more of the story here. So hopefully that doesn't happen. And hopefully they made some headway there this weekend. We'll see. Kids are so temperamental as far as that goes. But that was another story that came out of that weekend. Otherwise, it was a lot of other just young guys in town. I watched a couple of the interviews, very complimentary of everything. It seems like kids come and have a really great experience with Josh Heupel. They got to watch practice. And so that's good. And hopefully, this football season is going to be so huge in terms of getting these kids to Tennessee. If you're going to get another top 10, maybe top 5 class, that's the honest to God truth. You got to have another big season this year. But as far as it goes right now, it seems like things are going well so far this offseason.
Yeah. What do you made that comment about practice and just made me think about I saw a lot of those comments about Tennessee's practices from the recruits and talking about how high energy it was, how positive it was, how it was still demanding, but the vibe was just, kind of fun. Like everybody was out there with a purpose, really enjoying themselves. And then you hear about Kirby Smart's practices at Georgia where they're just these just brutal sessions that are harder than games. And obviously that works for Georgia. I mean, what Tennessee does works too. I mean, you go win 11 games. No, they didn't beat Georgia. If any Georgia fans are in here, I get that. We all know they lost to Georgia, but they won 11 games. They beat Alabama. They beat LSU. They beat Clemson. They had a really good season. They finished number 6. Like, that's, if you're not going to make the playoff, that's about as good as it can get. And then obviously what Georgia does works really well too. I mean, back-to-back championships, and kids go to those practices and they commit. Is it like 2 different styles of kids that you're recruiting? Because if Georgia and Tennessee is both going after the same kid and they're 50-50, I just wonder, what's the feeling there? Do you want to go to this environment at, like Josh Heupel has, or what Kirby Smart has here?
I have wondered with Kirby, because it seems like his culture,
and we've heard the audio, so we know it's legit.
He's a psycho. And I have certainly wondered if his culture, it just probably butts heads with the way that a lot of these kids are now, right? Because you see so many of them, and they're this just like, follow me on social media, I'm trying to be the dude, all of this stuff. And if you go with Kirby Smart, with Nick Saban, they're going to go and they're going to break you in half. That's what their goal is going to be. I have to feel like
but they still get the guys. They're still getting the guys.
They do. Though. I don't know, because that's a great question. That's a really great question, because yeah, you would go to a Heupel practice and be like, man, look at this culture. This is awesome. These dudes love each other. This is, it's not easy and kind or anything like that. I mean, you know, and Rodney Garner's on this coaching staff, and he'll rip your head off. But
it's not like it's this is fun. They went 5-7. They went 6-6. Like, it's fun. They went 11-2. You know, like, it's not.
Like you saw, I think it was Addison Nichols today. He was doing an interview, and I just saw a quote from him on Twitter, and he was just talking about Joe Milton. It was just like, oh, Joe's such a great leader and all these things. It's that, you know, where you have dudes complimenting each other, and they just act like they act like they're all on the same team. They really like each other, and that they're having, it's this bonding culture instead of this tyrannical culture. And so I really do wonder, that would be interesting to ask, like, some of these kids that have graduated from Kirby now that he's been there long enough to have an entire, or
somebody like
dudes.
Somebody like Cade Mays that played for both.
Yeah, I would be fascinated to hear what he has to say about Kirby compared to Heupel, because yeah, I mean, it's absolute tyrant compared to a dude that wants to, I don't even know what the right word would be to kind of wrap it up in one word, but I think people know what we mean when it's just like more, it's not friendlier. That's not the right word. Like
I think Kirby Smart
culture.
I think Kirby Smart does what Jeremy Pruitt tried to do, and Pruitt just couldn't do it because for whatever reason, Kirby's better at being that CEO type coach. He might be a psycho, but he can do that stuff. Whereas Pruitt was just so all over the place and really had no control, didn't get along with assistants, and just didn't really know how to run a program. It didn't work. So it was just negative and chaos. Whereas with Kirby, I don't know, maybe you see 15-0 and you're willing to put yourself through whatever.
Yeah, just put up with it to win a national championship. Maybe, obviously. I think that's what it became with Saban. Just over time, they were like, okay, this is going to probably suck. He's going to steamroll us, but we're going to win a national title before I leave this school. So, yeah, who knows? But regardless, the recruits got to see them this weekend. A lot of kids were very complimentary of what happened. And hopefully it all ends up with Tennessee getting an even more elite recruiting class, because so far it seems like it's shaping up that way. And you can build on, we've already talked about kind of the Nico effect, where you're getting some guys that come and they get asked like, oh, is Nico being here, does that make you want to come to Tennessee? Obviously, this is like wide receivers, running backs, and across the board, they're like, absolutely, I want to play with a guy like that. It looks like the future is super bright here. And so just keep going down that road. I think Tennessee will be all right. But anything else with recruiting before we talk about some of this basketball stuff, Zach?
No, I think that should pretty much wrap up the recruiting aspect of everything. And
yeah, I think so.
Basketball conversation.
This is going to be an interesting one.
Yes.
Before we get into,
because I really don't know your thoughts on it, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know my thoughts on it. We're gonna flesh it out here. but somebody wrote an article about how Tennessee should replace Rick Barnes with Dusty May at FAU. And we're going to discuss that right after I tell you about Rattle and Snap Tennessee whiskey. Nothing goes better with a Tennessee sports victory than a great glass of whiskey, and more specifically, a great glass of Rattle and Snap Tennessee Select Straight Whiskey. It is right here behind me. Let me grab it. Log Still Distillery has released a new Tennessee whiskey product line called Rattle and Snap Tennessee Whiskey, named after a long-forgotten game of chance. Rattle and Snap is a whiskey for those who make their own luck. There is a 4-year and an 8-year version of Rattle and Snap. This is the 4-year. You can take a look at that beautiful bottle. You can make amazing whiskey cocktails. It's also great for drinking straight. I demolished the bottle of 8-year. It is a beautiful bottle of whiskey, and you should get your hands on either of them. But Rattle and Snap can be found across the state of Tennessee, and then also Kentucky, Indiana, and Mississippi. So run and don't walk to get yourself some Rattle and Snap whiskey for that next Tennessee sports victory. I was hoping to crack open a Rattle and Snap after Tennessee made the Final Four, but instead I cracked open a Rattle and Snap because Tennessee didn't make the Final Four. But then Alabama lost, and I cracked it open because Alabama lost. So, everything comes out in the wash there. But thank you to Rattle and Snap. They're totally awesome. We're supposed to have the Rattle and Snap Tennessee stat, and I guess there's not necessarily one as far as this conversation goes, but the stat could just be that the Florida Atlantic Owls made the Final Four. And, here's the stat. This is the second time that Tennessee has run into one of these freaking Cinderella teams that has this magical run that nobody expected. And oh my gosh, Sister Jean and Loyola, they go to the Final Four. Tennessee's still never been to one. Oh, here comes Florida Atlantic. They never been to one, and they make it before Tennessee ever does. And both of those teams beat Tennessee on the way there. Makes me ill. But at this point, I would say not necessarily surprising. To get into this conversation that we're going to have here, this just solidified in some people's minds, it just solidified even further that Rick Barnes will never meet your expectations or exceed your expectations. I'll put it that way. He'll never exceed your expectations for March. I think this season, he met the expectations that I had. I said, this team could beat Duke. They could, but I don't think they're going to make it past the Sweet 16. Now, I thought they would lose to Purdue, not Florida Atlantic. So Duke win, great. Florida Atlantic loss, bad. And in light of that, this was at outkick.com. I don't remember who wrote it. I don't have it in front of me. But somebody over there wrote that Tennessee should replace Rick Barnes, fire Rick Barnes, and replace him with Dusty May at Florida Atlantic. And specifically, you have the connection there. Danny White's brother. Where are the Whites not athletic administrators? It's like his dad was the AD at Duke. His brother's the AD at Florida Atlantic. His other brother's the college basketball coach at Georgia. They're all over the place. But his brother's the AD at Florida Atlantic. And the guy at Outkick wrote that because of that connection, he should just go, hey, bro, why don't you send your boy up here to Tennessee? If you put in a good word for me, and we'll make this transaction happen. And Tennessee gets a new basketball coach that can maybe take them to the promised land. I'll throw it to you first, Zach. I obviously have plenty of thoughts on this, but when you read this, what did you think initially?
Yeah, well, I actually had saw the talk, and I didn't see that article, and then I wrote something myself about the whole situation. I don't think they should fire Rick Barnes to hire Dusty May. I don't think they should fire Rick Barnes at all. We've went over that discussion. I mean, that's pretty much is what it is. No point in rehashing all that. Kind of what I wrote is like Danny White's in a situation where Dusty May does seem like he'd be kind of the perfect fit for Tennessee because his teams play tough, but they also score points at a higher clip than Tennessee. I think you mentioned that they kind of ran an offense similar to Missouri's, so it's a little more exciting. It's more exciting what Tennessee currently runs, certainly. And you've got that connection at Florida Atlantic. Also, his brother that's at Georgia now. When he was at Florida, Dusty May was an assistant under Mike White then there at Florida. So there's also that connection. He's taken this team. He's been there for several years, kind of slowly built it up. This was actually the first year they've made the NCAA tournament. So I think after what 5, 6 years, 5, 6 years that he'd been there.
Yeah, something like that.
So to me, that is a little concerning because it's like, okay, you haven't really been doing this a lot. It's just lightning in a bottle. And I even said, I think last week on this show that I'm hesitant to say that you should hire a coach based off a tournament run. So I'm kind of going against my own, suggestion there. But you go 35-3, up until this point, you make this Final Four run, knock off some really good teams. Kansas State, I did not think that they would beat them at all. That was surprising to me. This guy's going to get a job this offseason somewhere. I mean, I think Texas Tech has an opening still. I think California. I don't know where he's going to end up, but somebody will hire him based off this run, even if they lose in the Final Four. And if you're Danny White, you're thinking, well, Rick Barnes is almost 70. If he were to retire this offseason, which nobody thinks is going to happen, then you have this perfect option here to just slide right in where he wants to coach a team that plays tough, but it's also something different offensively. We've kind of talked about how you come in and kind of flip some things, and that's how you can really get some kids to buy into a new culture. It seems like a perfect opportunity, but I don't think it's going to be there for Tennessee. I don't think Rick Barnes is going to retire, and there's no way that he's getting fired.
Completely agree. I mean, guess I'll give you my baseline here. The only way that I would want Danny to make such an aggressive move if it was a clear upgrade, which to me in this case would be, I already said this last week, it would be Kelvin Sampson at Houston. I mean, the guy already made a Final Four. He's had great teams. He made a Final Four at Oklahoma. He hasn't won a national title, but how many guys have? And so, like, to me, that would be like, okay, you are replacing a guy with a literal better track record than Rick Barnes. Period. Okay, you could do that and I would be like, whew, that's aggressive. Wowie, I didn't see that coming, but it's probably a good move. Okay, so that's the one where I would go, fine. I love the aggression. Let's try to get better. With Dusty May, I mean, so I'm looking at the guys.
He probably does need to do it another year. Like, I think,
yeah,
for a Power 5 program to feel really, really comfortable hiring him, I think you need to see this one more time. At least like you go Final Four, and then next year, maybe even if it's just like a Sweet 16, you're like, okay, he can play with these guys. Give him some talent. He can make something happen. I think it would be a bit of a risk at this point, but do you believe in what you saw this year and what you've seen in the tournament, or what we've seen in the tournament? I don't think many of us probably watched any FAU basketball throughout the year, so I'm not really going to, talk about that. But do you believe in what you've seen? That would be the whole point of this.
I mean, his best year before this one was last year, 19-15. They were second in their division in the CUSA. They made it. They lost in the first round of the CBI, not even in the NIT tournament. And so, I mean, yeah, he's had one magical year. And you look at the guys that have kind of been like that. Porter Wagner from Loyola, really done nothing. The guy from Florida, Gulf Coast, really done nothing. He's a USC. They did make the tournament this year, but it's not like he's gone on taking USC to a Final Four, all this stuff. The guys that really succeed are like, Mick Cronin at UCLA, came from Cincinnati, had an incredible track record. Cincinnati went to UCLA, made a Final Four. Like, it's that. That's where your sure things come in. Here, this is, I mean, one season. I love the way this guy coaches. Let me be clear. I love the way Dusty May coaches. Seriously. That inbounds play where he runs it like they're wide receivers and they're coming where they set up across the baseline and run it. Genius. Absolute genius. But you couldn't justify that to me. I would be very skeptical. Like, I would be like, whoa, this is a little, everybody even knows me as like the fire everybody guy. And I'm not a fire Rick Barnes guy. I think he's going to retire at Tennessee, but I just think like that would just be, it's just not smart. He just doesn't have that track record yet. Yeah, one Final Four is great, but Rick Barnes has a Final Four in his history. I mean, come on. Like, the guy has done it before, at least that much. Now, if FAU goes and wins a national title, maybe it's a different conversation because that's a pretty giant feat. But, like, dude, that would be a big leap. Yes, this guy is like technically sort of in the Danny White network or whatever you want to call it there because his brother's the guy's AD. But that would be a little much for me. I would say if they did it, I would go, whoa, that's crazy. And I would be skeptical. It would kind of, honestly, it would have, my surprise would be totally different. Like, I would be like, well, I can't believe they did that. But I think I would have a similar feeling to Josh Heupel. Like, I would kind of be like, yeah, this guy might be running a gimmick a little bit. It's not in the same way because it doesn't really translate one-to-one with football. But I would kind of be like, he seems pretty good, but we'll see. Like, I think I would have that kind of feeling if they actually pulled the trigger like that. And with that said, in no way do I think this is going to happen. This is not happening. This is total fantasy land. Jeff says Mick Cronin was at Xavier. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Because wasn't Huggins was at Cincinnati forever, and then
I
think he was replaced. Yeah.
No, wait. Big Ten Jeff. I was right. It's Cincinnati. He was at Cincinnati from 2006 to 2019.
So did he take over?
Correct me on my own show.
Did he take over for Huggins? Is that?
No, at Cincy, it was the guy that went to Louisville, the bald guy that got fired. Chris.
Yeah.
I can't think. But that was the guy that was at Xavier before, and then at Xavier now it's Sean
Miller.
Sean Miller, yeah, from Arizona. But yeah, I mean that's just way too much of a leap of faith, I guess you could call it, where you would just be going, this guy has had one amazing season, come lead a program that has some of the best resources in America. I mean, like, yeah, Tennessee hasn't been to a Final Four or whatever, but we have more money, more fans, more overall resources than any of these, like Big East, any of these, almost any of the ACC programs too. You have more resources and more fans than almost any of them, outside of just the absolute blue bloods like UNC. Like, I mean, and you would just be going, here, take over, to a dude that's had a single good season. That's nonsensical to me.
Does would his resume make you feel any different about the fact that it's not like he's been a head coach for 6 years, but he'd been an assistant for 15 years or almost before he took that job? He had been under Bobby Knight a little bit at Indiana. He is an Indiana guy too, so there would always be that, aspect of things as well anytime that job comes open. But it's not like he just came out of nowhere necessarily. Like, he's been grinding away for quite some time in college basketball. So he's seen a lot.
I just don't think I would have. I mean, I could dig into him further, that entire history, but I just think I would still have that same feeling of just like, he's been pretty good. We'll see. Where if you hired, again, I go back, like if you had that super aggressive move and went and hired Kelvin Sampson, I'd be like, whoa, now this is a great move. This is a guy who's, been there, done that, made a Final Four 2 years ago and almost made a Final Four this season. And, that's one thing. And this, just with May, I don't think I would get past that until I saw the evidence. I don't think I would get past that stage of just being like, yeah, we'll see how he does, if he could really do it.
Do you think we're making too much out of the Danny White connection too? Because when I was looking back at some of the hires he's made, a lot of them were guys that didn't necessarily have these connections to him. I mean, Josh Heupel is the one that we point to, but like Lance Leopold, when he hired him at, I guess, Buffalo, he didn't have a connection. I don't think Nate Oates had a connection to him. So
Nate Oates was just an assistant on that basketball team.
Okay. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like there's it doesn't seem like that's a prerequisite for Danny White at all. So I wonder if we're making a little too much of that.
Yeah, maybe. Honestly, who knows? And like, would he want to even do that to his brother? Like, take his coach? I don't know what the family dynamic is there. I would assume they get along. They seem like a good family, but yeah, I think
that's a good point. Yeah.
Jeff brings up Doug McDermott at Creighton. Oh, I love Doug McDermott. But I think he's like a dyed-in-the-wool Creighton guy. Didn't he like go there? That's like really in the weeds with college basketball.
Yeah, that's what. Well, that's like when Mike Gundy. Every time he came up for the Tennessee job, I never saw him leaving Oklahoma State. I mean, he's an Oklahoma State guy, played football there. He's from the area. He was never going to leave, Oklahoma State for Tennessee or one of these other jobs. And I do think sometimes people think they can pull these guys. I mean, it has happened. We have seen it happen a few times, but typically
no.
it's hard to get a guy away.
Well, first off, it was Greg McDermott, not Doug. Doug's his kid, who played at Creighton for all that time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
About that. But he's actually northern Iowa, and he coached in northern Iowa, and then Iowa State, and then Creighton. Interesting. Anywho, that's getting off the reservation a little bit there. The only other thing that I want to talk about was just like these seniors leaving potentially, and sort of the future for Tennessee basketball. I'll ask you this, Zach. Would you even want any of these seniors back at Tennessee? Because I'm torn on it. There are certain ones I want back.
I'd want Vescovy back.
Yeah, it's absolute no-brainer. I would beg Santiago Vescovy to stay at Tennessee.
If I knew that Josiah Jordan-James was going to be 100% for the whole season, I would say yes. But you can't count on that, and I think that throws the dynamic off so much where you don't know who's going to be playing each week, each game. And that's tough to manage if you're Rick Barnes and the basketball staff. It's really hard to manage because he's so important when he's out there, but you can't count on him. And then other guys on the team, they don't really know what their role is going to be. So I don't know if that would be the best idea, but Vescovy for sure.
I would say keep Vescovy if you at all can. I think he's going to leave. I think he's going to go play overseas ball. I mean, he is just like the perfect overseas basketball guy. I think.
Yeah, he's not an NBA guy.
No, but he would be good on a overseas team, I think. And so he could go do that. But man, you just set him up with an NIL deal or something and get him to come back and then hit the transfer portal. That's what I would do. Let everybody else go, hit that transfer portal and see what you can pull in. And I mean, what I would like to see is Rick subvert expectations, the ones that we talked about last week, where he really has adamantly like recruited to a culture rather than recruiting the best guys. He's recruited a Tyreek Key instead of a Mac McClung or something like that. That wasn't what that's 2 different years. He didn't do that, but I'm just saying he passed up on Matt McClung in the past, and then Tyreek Key this season was a transfer. I want him just go and get the best guy. Let these seniors go, bring in transfers. Because I mean, some of these teams that are in the Final Four, Miami, one of the best players transfer. I mean, it can just make such a massive, massive difference. And in basketball, the turnover it affects your team so much more because it's such a smaller rotation, way less players. So you can flip a team in one off season with transfers, recruits. Got a pretty decent recruiting class coming in. You got Deleone in the wings. You got Jefferson in the wings if he doesn't transfer. BJ Edwards in the wings if he doesn't transfer or whatever might be happening there. Just let those seniors go and let's hit the transfer portal. That would be my prescription, but
it's not going to happen though, right?
No, I think it's going to be.
It would require Rick Barnes completely changing a lot of his philosophies, and that's just not. It's just not going to happen. And he's almost 69 years old. Of course, it's not going to happen. But he's going to recruit to that culture because that's the style of basketball he plays, and he's not going to bring a guy in that won't play defense. Like that is not. It's just not going to happen. And a lot of those high-profile names. That's what you're going to get, or that's what you think you're going to get, and you think it's going to be a problem. And I don't see that happening.
I don't either, but it is what I would do. It just would be the smartest thing. Just be shameless. Rick's a good guy. He doesn't want certain players because of how they would interact with his team and mess up the dynamic in these things, or might act up off the court or whatever it might be. Just go get the best guy. Please. But
get somebody that can create their own shot and score. I mean, that's just fine.
I mean, you got Sakai coming back. You're gonna have the best point guard in the SEC next season if he can get back, be 100% healthy, and be that same guy again.
That's gonna be. I mean, he tore his ACL in February.
It's gonna be close.
That's gonna be really close. You start playing November. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't start playing until conference play.
Yeah, I would bet money that he's not going to play a lot until conference play. He might be like Josiah this season, and they take it really easy through those initial snoozer games. Um, uh, well, we'll see what exactly Rick does, and if he does get transfer players, we'll talk about him here. But we'll finish with this, Zach. I know you got to go here in a minute, but we'll finish with a little baseball talk. Back on the horse, baby. They went and they swept Texas A&M, but we'll talk about that right after I tell you about Superbook Sports. Make 2023 the year you beat Vegas. Superbook Sports gives you the chance every week to go head to head with the best odds makers in Las Vegas. No fancy computer algorithms, no guys across the pond setting lines for American sports, just the best team of odds makers in the business behind the counter at the Superbook in Las Vegas. Plus, Superbook features some of the best odds boosts and promo bets you will find anywhere. So download the Superbook Sports app right now or visit superbook.com and start your battle against Vegas. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. That is Superbook Sports. Another one of our great partners. Thanks to them. With baseball, they turned it around after getting swept by Missouri in embarrassing fashion. They went and they not only swept Texas A&M, and in two of those, they were pretty convincing wins where they had big leads and, really, really did it well. But that middle game was, to me, such a good sign because they got a lead. Then they lost it and they got behind and then they powered back. They gritted through it. They came back and they won on a walk-off. And that was such a relief to see this team power through that and get a come-from-behind win like that with a walk-off, because it just seemed like they've had a block on them, and finally that lifted a little bit, and that was really nice to see.
Yeah, maybe that. I mean, you know how baseball is. It's just like when you go through a hitting slump and nothing's going your way, and you get a little CNI single to go through the infield, and all of a sudden it kind of breaks you out of it, gives you some confidence, and you're kind of back in the groove. Maybe that's what they needed. They needed one of those games because they had so many of those games last season. At various times where you saw them get down and they got into the ninth inning and you still felt pretty confident. They could be down by 2 runs. You're like, they'll be okay. They'll find a way. And usually they did. And it was kind of reminded me a lot of last year's team. And also just the weather that game was wild. The wind, one of the wildest triples I think I've ever seen, when we thought the ball was way over the fence and it lands 40 feet from the fence. But yeah, certainly a good sign. Maybe that's what gets them back on track and kind of finally gets this team with the chemistry and everything the way it needs to be. I think they're scoreless right now, actually playing UNC Asheville in the second innings. Hopefully they can pick things up a little bit this afternoon, but they should cruise in that game without any issues.
Mind. The whole inning without scoring against UNC Asheville. Season is over. It's over. No, I really like this team when they get going. It is there. It feels. Well, it feels better than the basketball team. I don't think they're as inconsistent, but it does feel kind of similar to the basketball team because when you see the flashes, you're like, "Whoa, this team's good." They got some zhuzh, whatever you want to call it. But things can go flying off the rails for them too, like it did against Missouri. Maybe it was just the weather, the wind, or whatever might have been going on there. But I will say, even still with this weekend, the pitching has been disappointing so far.
And Dollander still wasn't the ace that he's supposed to be.
Yeah. The best pitching of the entire weekend was kind of the middle of the game with Burns in that second game. Was just absolutely locked down, and then the wheels came off. But so all these guys, they can still do it. Obviously, they just gotta go out and specifically stop with the bad starts. It was all 3 games.
Fielding still needs to be a little better too. We saw saw a few misplays. Yeah, there's still some things there need to tighten up, especially before you get to May and June and when it really counts. But hey, I think we mentioned it last week or the week before. Look at Ole Miss last season. I mean, they had a losing record in conference play. I think they were 14-16. They're national champs.
Yeah.
So you just got to get by and turn it on when it's time to turn it on.
Here's kind of the long and the short of this coming weekend against LSU. If they get swept, not good. But it is going to be at LSU, and you almost go, it sort of is what it is. They're really good. If they win one game, I would say that's what I'm expecting. Tennessee's going to win 1 out of 3 there. If they can win that series,
that's huge. Oh, massive.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing they could do this entire season.
I think this series will tell us a lot about this team because this is going to
Yes.
be the brightest lights that they've seen really since that opening series, out west, and that was some pretty good crowds out there. But at LSU, top team in the country, the reputation that just LSU has in general as a baseball program, knowing where you're at as a team right now, that you've had some struggles, but you've kind of picked yourself off the mat. You've swept a good Texas A&M team. We're going to learn a lot about how they respond this weekend. Are they up to the challenge when, are you going to play up to your competition type deal? That this is going to be probably the most intriguing series of the year.
Absolutely. I'm on pins and needles about it because, man, if they win that series, that's going to be huge, huge, huge. And obviously it will show exactly if you can go on the road and beat that team twice. I mean, that shows you can beat anybody. The chance for Tennessee to maybe finally grab a national title in baseball is here yet again. Obviously, it's been there for the last 2 seasons, and they've come up short. But I think it would pretty much prove that this team has what it takes to do that this season.
And I think if you go win one game and the other 2 games aren't blowouts, they're just close baseball losses, like a 5-3, 5-4, 4-3, something like that. You're right there where you need to be pretty much, and hits just didn't fall your way that afternoon. I mean, that does happen, but you go and get blown out in 3 straight games, and yeah, that's kind of concerning.
Yeah, let's not do that. Let's keep that to a minimum. All right. Well, we can finish with this. The softball team stuck it to Alabama, won their series against Alabama over the weekend. The softball team now, I just pulled it up, 26-2. They in the SEC so far, 8-1. Their only loss in the SEC was a 4-2 loss to Alabama, where they just couldn't get the bats going. But then in the other 2 games, 5-1, 7-5 wins. They're cooking, and that's pretty fun. I mean, they look really, really good. The pitching is really good. And this weekend, I mean, Alabama's one of the better teams in America. I don't think they're as elite as they have been in past years, but yeah, they're pretty good. And you won the series against them, and that's exciting too. So watch out for that softball team. I watched a couple of the games this weekend. Really exciting, really talented team. So maybe finally the weeklies can get theirs this season. Everybody, they've been so close. They've made it to the College World Series finals and just haven't been able to win. So maybe this is the year for them.
Everything seems to be, on the right path at Tennessee these days. So you never know.
What sport isn't doing decently well right now at Tennessee? I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Thank you so much for watching the show. Thanks to everybody who tuned in and they love to consume this nonsense that we put out. At Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports. Follow us everywhere. Hit the like button. Hit the notification bell. Do all the stuff. I mean, you made it this far. I think you know what to do. Thank you for watching. Obviously thinking about everybody in Nashville. My goodness, unimaginable. But that is all. We'll probably have a midweek segment. We'll have to see how it works out. But other than that, hopefully we'll talk to y'all a little later this week.
See you guys later.